Please be seated. This Honorable House now resumes its sitting. Honorable members, let me apologize for myself for being a little late. I've had apologies from just the member for the 2nd District that he had to attend a graduation. You will remember that when we were here last, we made some amendment to the order of the day, and for some reason I'm not finding my order of the day. Can we recess for two minutes? This House is in recess. Please be seated. This Honorable House now resumes its sitting. Okay, I have all my tools before me. Members, you will recall that when we were here, we made several amendments to the ninth sitting order of the day, in which the Premier moved a motion for 2 additional bills, and we had also dispensed with 2 additional motions, along with the motion brought by the Minister for Transportation. So we pick up now with the 3 remaining bills: Criminal Justice, Counterterrorism, and Financial Investigative Agency, 3 bills brought by the Honorable Attorney General. So I now call upon Honorable Dawn J. Smith to move her motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that the bill shortly entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act 2021 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the primary objective of this bill is twofold. Firstly, to establish the Council of Competent Authorities and define its role, functions, and powers. And secondly, to substitute the references in the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act 1993 to the Director of Public Prosecutions by the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the Cabinet approved the establishment of the Council of Competent Authorities, which I will refer to as the Council. A key function of the Council includes guiding the territory's international cooperation regime by ensuring compliance with internationally established standards of cooperation in areas including anti-money laundering, terrorist financing, regulation and supervision of financial services business, and tax administration. This allows for all the territory's competent authorities, which are the Governor's Office, the Attorney General's Chambers, Financial Investigation Agency, the International Tax Authority, and the Financial Services Commission to work much more closely together. This includes advising on necessary reforms to achieve compliance with established international standards of cooperation and oversee compliance in the implementation of the laws and administrative practices in such areas. Mr. Speaker, the role of the Council is central to the territory's structure of compliance. It is therefore advisable that it should be given statutory recognition to place it on the same level with similar bodies that also ensure compliance with international standards. Some similar bodies also recognized in legislation include, for instance, the Joint Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Advisory Committee, established under the Proceeds of Criminal Conduct Act 1997, and the Intergovernmental Committee on Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Matters, established under the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Code of Practice 2008. Establishing the Council in the bill will address any questions regarding its ability to be effective, and the bill therefore seeks to establish the Council in Clause 7 by providing for its composition and defining its role, functions, and powers. It also makes provision for the conduct of proceedings in the Council. Further, Mr. Speaker, prior to the revision of the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act in 2013, the Attorney General, along with the Governor, was responsible for processing all the international cooperation matters relative to criminal conduct. This role was inadvertently overlooked in the 2013 revision of the laws, and indeed, the Attorney General never ceased to perform the functions of competent authority in relation to such matters. The bill therefore seeks to remedy the drafting oversight. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to my colleagues' support on the bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion, and as the Attorney General just mentioned, she seeks to gain our support. And Mr. Speaker, though with these brief words, I think it's necessary for us to enhance these legislation as we work to be compliant. And Mr. Speaker, though there are two parts to the recommendation, we see that the one recommendation is a national cooperation and cooperation to address any erroneous situation made in the 2013 revision of the Act. And Mr. Speaker, as we go through this bill line by line, we will work to enhance the parts of this bill. So with those few words, I just rise in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. The bill has been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for debate on the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021. I now recognize the Minister for Natural Resources, Labor and Immigration and member for the 9th District, the Honorable Vincent O. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to say just a few brief words on this bill. Like my colleague before me, I too support this very, very important bill. Mr. Speaker, it brings some vocabulary to the public that I don't think most persons are quite familiar with, which I would just like to go over briefly, because these are terms we hear quite often from various persons as they sit in the House. It has to do with the whole idea of domestic competent authorities. We do hear those words cast around from time to time, but here we have a full listing of what we're referring to when we use those three words: domestic competent authorities in the British Virgin Islands. The Governor's Office, Attorney General's Chambers, Financial Investigation Agency, International Tax Authority, Financial Services Commission. Mr. Speaker, it goes to show, it's a small bill number, it's very hefty. It goes to show that though the BVI is a relatively small country, our international presence is quite weighty and quite hefty. Because this is based on our international exposure as a financial jurisdiction. And though we are small and maybe physically insignificant, when it comes to the role the BVI plays in the international arena, we pack a big punch, a really, really big punch. And therefore, we have to comply as if we were a bigger country, say Russia or America. We have to follow the same rules and guidelines because the nefarious players are out there. There are persons trying to, with terrorist financing. We're up against money laundering. We're up against tax evasion. We're up against human trafficking. And we have to safeguard our reputation. We have to safeguard our country. Therefore, we must make sure we do our part to be compliant in the eyes of the bigger world. If you ask anyone up there where the BVI is, they mightn't be able to tell you where we are geographically, but they could tell you the role that we play in the financial world. We play a major, major role. So, Mr. Speaker, as I close with those few words, I just want to thank the AG for bringing this bill so very timely. As we go into our assessment, I think next year we go into our assessment, it's very important that all our ducks are in order. So when we are being judged, you can say, well, yes, you are fully compliant. Carry on with your business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the member for the 9th District for his contributions. Floor remain open. I recognize the Minister for Health and Social Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Carvin Malone.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for affording me the opportunity to lend a voice on what would be, as in the one of the chapters, seeks to restore the Attorney General as the appropriate competent authority under the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act. And it would not be normal to even speak on this, save for the fact, for the time that we're in. Mr. Speaker, the reality of the day is that the territory's good name is under fierce attack. And all that we have done, because amazing enough, on the government's site, there is a whole host of bills that the public have been invited to view, all very important in making sure that we comply with all of the international standards, but not only in compliance with what they want, but in terms of maintaining a good name in the industry and the time that we're in. In the next few days, the next few weeks, me, the Minister of Health and Social Development, would be on a course of having the public fully informed as to why it is that we would have to be here time after time, hour after hour, day after day, to make sure that all of the legislations required to maintain the good name of the Virgin Islands, to maintain compliance with the financial services sector, with the whole good governance, because that is the only buzzword around these days, good governance. And indeed, as we go through the exercise of the Commission of Inquiry, the public is yearning for a full understanding as to the true motive, as to the course of action taken, to be taken, and how it's going to be taken would affect lives. Because here we are in a pandemic era, and we talk about lives and livelihoods. And this, of what we are dealing with, deals with livelihoods. So I think that we have 3 bills to complete this session, one of the 3, the easiest of the 3, and the quickest of the 3. So I would I would not use any more time on this because we have two others of which we should get along with. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to be mindful, and each of us are mindful to make sure that we never lose sight of the time that we're in. It is not just about COVID, it's about protecting of our good name, and this we have to do. So thank you very much, AG, for bringing it forward, and thank you for shepherding it the way that it will have to be. Thank you. Sorry, it has my full support.
I thank the territorial member for his contributions. Floor is still open. No other member appears to wish to contribute to the debate. With that said, I call upon the Honorable Attorney General to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would also like to express my thanks to my colleagues in this honorable House for their robust support of this amendment legislation. As they have said, Mr. Speaker, we often lose sight of the incredible amount of work that has to go into maintaining the competitiveness of the Virgin Islands on the global stage. And in so doing, I think it is also appropriate for me to recognize the hard work of the teams at the Financial Services Commission, the Ministry of Finance, and of course the Attorney General's chambers, as well as the other competent authorities for their contributions over the years as members of the Council of Competent Authorities, which we're seeking to place on a statutory footing. It has been, as I indicated earlier, in force or in existence for some time, and it has been doing a very thorough job of ensuring that the Virgin Islands remains current with what is happening internationally and what we need to do, as they say, to remain at the table with the big boys. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much, and I look forward to the committee session. Thank you.
I thank you. Honourable members, it has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021 be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Therefore, I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a second time.
This act may be cited as the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to pursue clause by clause. This House is now in committee. Honorable members have deliberated the bill entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021, and I now invite the mover of the motion, the Honorable Attorney General, to report.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the bill entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act 2021 has passed through committee without amendments. Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the bill entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act 2021 be read a third time and passed.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the bill entitled Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021 be now read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is passed. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a third time.
This act may be cited as the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed without amendments. I now invite the Honorable Attorney General to present for its second and third reading the bill entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move that the bill shortly entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to criminalize terrorism and the financing of terrorism, to make provision for the detection, prevention, prosecution, conviction of terrorist activities within the Virgin Islands, and to give effect to the several international conventions and resolutions for the countering of terrorism and terrorist financing, and for other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides for terrorist offenses and penalties. These include terrorist acts, terrorist bombing, and terrorist financing. The bill further provides for the prohibition of persons dealing with property of or derived or generated from a designated terrorist entity. It also provides for the prohibition of persons making property or financial related services available to terrorist designated entities. Mr. Speaker, extensive provisions seek to address other types of offenses, such as those related to recruitment of persons for terrorist purposes, joining an entity that carries out terrorist acts, harboring or concealing terrorists, the provision of instruction or training to persons committing terrorist acts, attending or receiving training to commit a terrorist act, incitement, promotion, or solicitation of property for the commission of terrorist acts, and also providing property to facilitate terrorist acts. Other offenses, including nuclear material or facilities, importation, acquisition of radioactive material, and offenses involving radioactive material and radioactive devices are also provided for. The bill seeks to place restrictions on the development of certain biological weapons and toxins. Mr. Speaker, the bill also provides for travel bans subject to exemptions, reporting of suspicious information, and for arms embargo. Significant parts of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provide for laws relating to detention of goods suspected to be terrorist property, as well as for forfeiture, as well as restraint orders, arrests, and searches. As can be gleaned from what I've just said, Mr. Speaker, this bill is indeed an extensive one, and it marks the territory's development as a jurisdiction called upon to conform to international standards as much the same as many jurisdictions across the globe. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the support of my colleagues on this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion, and while I'm on my feet, I'll briefly state that I'm in full support of this bill, as we are an international jurisdiction, and we need to strengthen whatever our legislations are in terms of, we speak about terrorism. Mr. Speaker, this legislation regarding terrorism and terrorist-related matters, and it's, like I mentioned, it's a means of strengthening the current counter-terrorism legislative agenda and the regime so that we can satisfy the international market. And being a financial service jurisdiction, we understand that persons may be involved in such activities, but we want to make sure that we have the mechanisms in place to make sure that we iron out any sort of that sort of behavior. So I applaud the AG and the Financial Services, Financial International, FIA, in terms of bringing this legislation so that we can address terrorism and the thought of it in our territory. Thank you.
Thank you. Floor is now open for debate. I recognize the Deputy Speaker and Territorial Member, the Honorable Neville A. Smith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a very important bill. Counter-Terrorism Act 2021. I must applaud the AG for the bill notes, Mr. Speaker. Something I've been asking for a long time that we're now seeing. Mr. Speaker, this bill notes, you see key features of more than 126 key features to propose this legislation. Mr. Speaker, this is something that's very important that the public and the people of the Virgin Islands can get to see and understand the purpose of this bill, to show the true essence of what this bill means and what it does. So again, I must applaud the AG and her team for putting this together. Mr. Speaker, there's some very important keynotes here as well that the public must be aware of and learn as well, so that they too could be one that help police this bill. Because when it comes to terrorism, is something that everyone have to pay attention to and keep their eyes open, Mr. Speaker. We have clause 53, where it seeks to define classified security information. It may sound something simple, Mr. Speaker, but those are very important things that we need to keep eyes out for as well. Also, privileged communication. You know, there's a lot of stuff in here, Mr. Speaker, and I encourage the people of the Virgin Islands to get hold of this bill and read it, understand it, because it's all of our duty to protect each other. I stand to say that I support this bill 100%. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Speaker for his contributions. I recognize the Minister for Natural Resources, Labor and Immigration and Member for the 9th District, the Honorable Vincent O. Wickley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to support this, again, very important bill. Mr. Speaker, terrorism is a word we didn't know too long ago, but it's a word we are all familiar with now. And over time, they have gotten very sophisticated in the way they operate. And Mr. Speaker, like was said before, the BVI, being an international player in financial services, we have to make sure we safeguard ourselves from sophisticated players who may think that because we are a small jurisdiction in the middle of nowhere, they can use the BVI as a place to carry out illegal activities. We have to always make sure that we safeguard our reputation. If we're going to remain competitive and compliant, Mr. Speaker, we have to always be on our bar. Mr. Speaker, I must commend the AG. If you look at this bill here, it's a hefty piece of document, almost 200 pages, I believe. 144 pages. Mr. Speaker, you have to appreciate that this here was not put together overnight. It took the chambers a very long time to put this bill together for our protection. Mr. Speaker, our reputation must always be top-notch if you're going to survive. Because there's always going to be somebody trying something and trying something through the BVI. Since we've been in the House, we've passed many, many pieces of legislation. And like I said before, it's not done just for fun because we want to be here. They are necessary. If you're going to build strong institutions and advance this country, it must start on a legislative framework, whether it's small amendments or big bills like this. These things take a lot of time and a lot of effort. But if you're going to remain competitive, if you're going to guard our reputation, just because that's why I had an issue with the term COI, because that brings a connotation with it that something funny might be going on. You could have called it an audit, it would have served the very same purpose. Because your reputation once tarnished is very, very difficult to reclaim. Mr. Speaker, you know if you are blacklisted, it lasts for an entire year. There's nothing you can do about it because reviewed at the end of the year. So if in January they put you on the blacklist, for that whole year, you have to live the consequences of that bad reputation. So we have to always make sure that we are ahead of the game, always making sure we are compliant. And Mr. Speaker, we know the goalpost is always shifting. So you're constantly changing your dance all the time. You can't leave a dance floor. You always have to be there changing according to the tune. So I commend the AG for bringing this very important legislation before us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for those few words.
I thank the member for the 9th District for his contribution. I recognize the Junior Minister for Trade and Economic Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Shireen Deflax Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of the counter-terrorism bill. This brings back a lot of memories for me. Mr. Speaker, I know that everyone knows of the unfortunate disaster in New York City with the bombing of the World Trade Center. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, the second attempt, unfortunately, was successful. The first attempt, Mr. Speaker, was a nightmare for many of us and for my family personally, as my sister Sharon was in that building when the terrorists attempted to blow it up the first time. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, we must put these sorts of rules and regulations in place so that we are able to at least attempt to stop this sort of activity from ever happening. It was one of the longest days of my life, Mr. Speaker. I remember walking into the First Caribbean Bank and watching the screen. That is when I realized that there was an issue in New York. And my sister was on the 100 and something floor, working at a restaurant called Windows of the World as a banquet manager. And we waited, and we waited all day, almost into the night, for that call. Thank God she was able to make it out alive. On the second attempt, many persons were not able to say that. And so I stand here today as someone who understands what damage terrorism can do, not only to our country, but to families, it is quite devastating, and I know that we also lost some persons from the Virgin Islands, both the US and British, in the second bombing of the World Trade Center. So, Mr. Speaker, whatever we can do to protect the BVI, we need to ensure that we do that, and by passing legislation, and of course ensuring that whatever we pass, that it is enforced to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Junior Minister for her contributions. Floor is still open. I recognize the Minister for Health and Social Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Carvin Malone.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank you very much again for lending my voice to this bill, which I support. I think it is going to be critical for us to voice our support of these bills for the importance of which they carry, because opening an account in the Virgin Islands is, well, I can state it simply by saying it is not as easy as it used to be. Even volunteering your services in the Virgin Islands is not as easy as it used to be. The world as we know it has changed. So when you look in terms of terrorism and how it's funded and how we provide measures in order to ensure that the territory itself is not a facilitator of the funding, and ways in which the territory is itself robust in this. It is only when measures like these come before you, because of the, what's the word, voluminous nature of the bill, some might well not have taken the time to read it through thoroughly. And just like any good old insurance policy, it is only when the car hit a deer passing, you wonder if your policy covers it. So it was found that, and this is, from notes that was researched, as it currently stands, the territory of the Virgin Islands relies on 3 main orders extended to the territory by the United Kingdom to handle terrorist-related matters. We have namely the Terrorism, United Nations Measures Overseas Territories Order 2001, the Anti-Terrorism, Financial, and Other Measures Overseas Territories Order 2002, and the Al-Qaeda and Taliban Order 2012. It was determined that in light of the deficiencies highlighted, there was a need to enact additional legislations in the territory to supplement the current Terrorism Act extended to the territory by the United Kingdom in order to incorporate additional measures recommended by FATF and the United Nations Security Council. Mr. Speaker, I highlighted that only because, as I'm saying, it's only when you come up for audits. AG, is it 2022 that we come up for audits on this? It's only when you come up for audits, and just like how I think that all 20 members, past and present, immediately past and now present, would have found that it came up for audit as to the register of interest. And might we say, there are comments to be made. But here is even more critical, because when the audits come in 2022, then, and only then, you would be looking in terms of whether or not the first world, second world countries would be seeking to put you on some quote-unquote list of which our whole center of finance would be rocked. So it is critical, and I am going to be the first to say, I'm no expert in this. We have to rely on the AG's chambers, on the experts, on the United Kingdom, on the United Nations, to make sure that whatever is required in order to fit or suit the bill, that this territory remains in this. And I'm going to repeat this now, and I'm going to repeat it in the next particular bill coming up. Protection of a good name is at play as we speak. There are those who will seek to tarnish our names. That is not my goal. Our goal is to make sure that we not only talk the talk, but we walk what we talk, and we walk the walk. And in doing this, in doing the number of bills that we've had to pass in this year, it is not an exercise of which we have suddenly got a unfilled appetite to be here in the House passing legislations. Each one of these, even in the first one where there was an error, oversight, overzealousness, I don't know which one it is, where we had one office that had to be replaced in its proper place in order for it to be effective, for the legislation to continue as envisaged, the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Amendment Act 2021. Mr. Speaker, when we're done, there are going to be about 25 to 35 legislations. One would ask, why are these now coming as fast and furious as they may seem? And I always have to remind the people, because there are those who would pretend as if COVID-19 and the effects of the lockdown globally did not affect the timing of some of these legislations required in order to fit the evaluation dates, to suit the implementation deadlines, and to stay in compliance. We are fighting those who would have selective amnesia when it suits them, as it relates to why certain things could not be done. And I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, hope we have an opportunity to speak a little bit later down, because I am a little bit wary of those who will pull their whole competence of amnesia, selective, when it suits them. I support the bill. I think in committee stage we'll be here a while, unless we're going to take the entire book and pass it. If we go clause, well, when we do go clause by clause, there are quite a few clauses. So the public will just have to be in tune to the fact that it is a 100-page document, 144-page document, and in terms of chapters, paragraphs, it must have about 600. But, Mr. Speaker, nonetheless, it is something we have to go through. It is something that's required, and the completeness, I have to, in advance, thank the AG's office, the drafters of this, who've had to amend it from the original draft. Because the original draft must have taken some time because it is critical in the next step ahead and looking forward to 2022 when the evaluation of this, what is put in place, comes to play. Thank you very much.
I thank the territorial member for his contributions. Floor remains open. With no other member wishing to debate the bill on the floor, I invite the Honorable Attorney General, the sponsor of the bill, to wrap up the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I also express my thanks to my colleagues in this honorable House for their support of the Counter-Terrorism Bill 2021. These types of legislation reminds us, and when we hear the stories that were given, and particularly the account given by the Junior Minister for Trade, it reminds us that we live in a very small world and that whatever we hear on the news can affect us at some point or another. I should also express my thanks again, not only to the drafting team at the Attorney General's office, but to the Financial Services Commission for their technical assistance in putting the Counterterrorism Bill 2021 together, for their research and consideration of the relevant issues that we do have to take into account and make provision for as we seek to continue our preparations not only for the evaluations that are upcoming, but generally to make sure that we are in good order on the world stage. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and look forward to the committee stage and to our discussions there. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021 be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a second time.
This act may be cited as the Counter-Terrorism Act 2021.
Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to consider it clause by clause. This House is in committee. The members in the well of the House have deliberated on the Counter-Terrorism Act 2021, a hefty piece of document over 100 and something pages. I invite the mover of the motion, Honorable Attorney General, to report.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the bill entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021 has passed through committee with amendments. Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the bill entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021 be read a third time and passed as amended.
I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2021 be now read a third time and pass as amended. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a third time.
This act may be cited as the Counter-Terrorism Act 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed as amended. I now call upon the Honorable Attorney General to introduce for the second and third reading the bill entitled Financial Investigative Agency Amendment Act 2021.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move that the bill shortly entitled Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to effect necessary amendments to the Financial Investigation Agency Act 2003 to update and streamline the provisions of the Act. In particular, the bill aims to empower the Financial Investigation Agency to enable it to better perform in meeting the AML CFT obligations attributable to it in readiness for the next CFATF mutual evaluation of the Virgin Islands, which is currently slated for 2022. Mr. Speaker, in essence, the bill introduces new definitions relating to money laundering, terrorism and terrorist financing, and proliferation financing to better articulate these functions of the Financial Investigation Agency. The bill also defines a financial institution, designated non-financial business and profession, and non-profit organization to map out the FIA's jurisdiction over these entities in defined circumstances. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the bill redefines the role and functions of the FIA to accord fully with those of a financial intelligence unit. In this respect, the FIA's supervisory powers in relation to designated non-financial business and professions are outlined. Such powers extend to nonprofit organizations, but in relation to those that are considered to pose money laundering, terrorist financing, or proliferation financing risks, as generally most nonprofit organizations are viewed as presenting a low risk in that regard. In order to ensure the effectiveness of the Financial Investigation Agency, as required under the Financial Action Task Force recommendations, the institution is being given reasonable powers to better execute its mandate through the process of requesting relevant documents and information examining persons under oath, including before a magistrate, issuing necessary directives, taking enforcement action as considered necessary, and compounding an offense instead of taking the route of prosecution before the courts. Mr. Speaker, the overall aim of the bill is to strengthen the functioning and efficiency of the Financial Investigation Agency to deliver on behalf of the Virgin Islands some of the enforcement and international cooperation obligations outlined in the FATF 40 recommendations. It is believed, Mr. Speaker, that the amendments outlined in the bill will provide the necessary regime for a more efficient and effective financial investigation agency in the Virgin Islands. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that my honorable colleagues will support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion, and I do support this amendment as the AG rightfully asked for our support. Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021. And Mr. Speaker, just briefly going through the bill, I understand that there are new definitions that will be included in this bill. I see the acronym DNFBP. I guess that means, as I'm reading, non-financial business and profession that qualifies as a relevant person under the regulation 2 of the anti-money laundering regulation, and or business that is designated under the non-financial business designation. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to add new definitions. We'll see also domestic competent authority, financial institution, terrorism, terrorist financing, and we'll also see financial offense. That was deleted and is now substituted by a new definition. Some other definitions would be steering committee, that was deleted, board, and various different additions to this bill. And as we go through this line by line, this increase the powers of the Financial Investigation Agency. And Mr. Speaker, though we work to amend these legislation and make them all current, we are here in full support of the AG and the FIA as they seek to do the work that they are intended to do. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, rightfully so, I fully support this amendment, and I look forward to the debate as I second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. The bill has been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for debate. I recognize the Honorable Minister for Health and Social Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Carvin Malone.
Mr. Speaker, as I had indicated earlier, that I would verbally lend support to each of these, because behind the scene of this, what represents, I think it is 50, if not 60% of our territory's income, there are a lot of hard-working people who folks normally will not see, but if their weight is not felt, then it will be a different tone, a different song, because the finances of the country being found not in compliance would take on a different measure. So it is important to show our appreciation for those who toil in the engine room to make sure that all is what is required, notwithstanding the attacks, the challenges, and the hard work necessary to keep us in compliance. So while others sleep through the night. There are those who labor and toil. I was joking earlier with the AG that they might need to reduce the 42 hours a week sleep that they get and cut it down to 35 hours. She said, no, they're not even getting 21 a week. So it cannot be, you cannot cheat the persons of the additional sleeping hours that they need. Have to give them more staff. But the reason why I want to make sure that the records properly reflect is that there are continuous attacks from all sectors, natural and man-made, as relates to what we have to do. This legislation here, we had one that made, though seemingly simple, amendments to the Criminal Justice Act. Another one, voluminous in nature, but required in order to meet the international audits because of our standing in the worldwide sphere of financial services. And here we are again. Every time there is a requirement for enhanced legislation, new legislation, or to correct legislation, it is brought to the House. This government is criticized for attacking too many of these legislations, but as I always says, in repeating the same thing, you basically have appreciation for those who may not have been tuned in at the time before. I often said it is important to recognize that we are under attack. Open your books here. Economic substance there. 15% taxation around the corner. Every impediment known to man thrown at you. But it is important that for as long as we have strength and breath to see to it, so we cannot get weary in well-doing. So if we require 42 hours of sleep a week, take it. But if time that you can't even get that amount of sleep and have to labor and toil from dusk to dawn. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I lend full support to this bill. In order to bring it up to speed, up to par in what it intends to do. I think one of the questions I would again have to ask is that since it ties hand in hand or hand in glove now to the terrorism measure that we just passed in the House, then I will have to ask the question again. What further measures as it relates to staffing and practical space would be required to take on the increased roles in order to make the agency the best and most effective that it could be. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I thank,
I fully support this bill, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honorable Minister for his contribution to the debate. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition and member for the 8th District, the Honorable Marlon A. Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to give my brief contribution to this bill, the Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021. Mr. Speaker, I didn't want the opportunity pass, and it wasn't placed on the record that I stood in support of the past 3 measures specific to the financial services legislations that were just passed, because there's been a long-standing position in this House, despite our differences politically and otherwise, that once it comes to this industry, we will find a way to work collectively in the best interests of this industry. And this is no exception, Mr. Speaker, and I wanted to ensure that my voice was heard in support of these measures brought before by the Honorable Attorney General. And she has my full and unequivocal support. Mr. Speaker, particularly with this particular measure that we're doing here today, the amendment to the FIA, is to make the FIA fit for purpose, specifically to tackle the specific concerns and to really be prepared to deal with the mutual evaluation that is coming up, I believe, whether it's this year or next year, which is to ensure that we continue to be the leaders, the trendsetters as it relates to piloting legislation internationally and globally. Speaker, I too would like the member before me, would like to commend the team that continues to labor in the vineyard to ensure that the BVI is at the cutting edge within the global standards, making sure that our legislation are second to none, and ensure that we comply in all aspects of terrorist financing, money laundering, and all the likes. The FIA play a very important role in the global financial network, especially in the industry that we depend so heavily on in terms of economic viability. The FIA is what I call the firewall between our financial system and those who wish to do illicit activity through our financial system. One of the things that is important coming out of this exercise is that there needs to be a level of public consultation, or at least to allow persons to understand what, if any, is the impact to them coming up with this legislation. Legislation speaks to NPOs, it speaks to a lot of aspects that local businesses engage, and you don't want to have them innocently caught in innocently doing their business. As they say, ignorance is no excuse for the law. So I think we have a responsibility to ensure that persons are fair with what is in these legislation, how it will impact the way that they do business, how we can ensure that they are in compliance with the legislative requirements that are outlined within this act, the one before it, and the Criminal Act amendments that were made earlier. So I charge the FIA and the team to really, after this process is completed, to ensure that the public's aware of how they can be impacted by these specific legislations. But I want to let the team know that they have my full support. I know they're doing all they can do to ensure that we are in compliance with all the key pieces of legislation to ensure that the BVI remains one of the top and best regulated international financial jurisdictions, I've had the pleasure of working with many of you. I know that your commitment to this industry and commitment to this territory is second to none. And I want to encourage you to keep up the good work, continue to keep focused, because the attacks and I'll leave it there. The effects are coming from several angles. And we have to ensure that we are guarded, our firewall is updated, and our people are well trained to be able to meet the needs of this industry and by extension the needs of our people and our economy. So again, you have my full support, Honorable Attorney General, and I look forward to the further discussion of this bill in the committee stage.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to debate? Seeing none, I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the bill, but the mere fact, Mr. Speaker, is that the bill being here knows that it has my support, because under our system, it couldn't get on if the government side didn't support the measure, because it's government business, which is the people's business. So I thank the AG, Financial Services, but I also thank all the members too of the NAMLEC, where we meet all the time, the Anti-Money Laundering Committee, in which I co-chair with the governor, whoever's in the post of governor. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it's important to point this out, because we have had many challenges during COVID. And the Minister of Health rightfully said that there are those who want to divorce COVID-19 challenges from them being an impediment towards us getting certain things done, and done within certain time, which is impossible to do. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that when we were able to start to meet again as of late, in terms of when this year started, and we started to meet, there was a sense of mindset by a few that we were behind. And those who work with me know that I always ask for us to put what we're doing in a graph, I call it a matrix, so that we could chart and be clear where we're going. And when we started to take off, we realized that we were more in front than most people are giving us credit for. Our biggest section now is to make sure of implementation. Like the Minister of Health rightfully said, and make sure that they're actually functioning, which is what we're working on next. So I said that to say, Mr. Speaker, that the public officers have been working extremely hard. And the public officers here are no different to anywhere else in the world. They have the same challenges. They have, some of the same limitations. But they have worked hard to make sure as a country we remain on the cutting edge. Not only with FIA, but overall. And Mr. Speaker, when you look and see, as a leader, one of the leaders in this region, I marvel when persons think that in order to be successful, we have to be like the bigger nations. But when you check, Mr. Speaker, every place in this world due to COVID-19 right now, more so now than ever, are hemorrhaging with their economies. That means financial challenges. And most of them have undergone major cuts. We have seen the UK come out of Brexit. And a lot of the funding to a lot of the OTs has been cut. And with them being cut, the those OTs have to find now how to be able to offset those funding that was coming to them. So they expect to do more now with less because the funding has been cut. We've seen where we have, even in the UK due to COVID, a lot of things have been cut. And even in the US, I remember a few months ago with COVID, there was, I think, a fire in one of those states. And when they went, they said that they probably would have get the fire out, but due to the issues of COVID, they had to cut back, and a lot of firemen had to be laid off. But, Mr. Speaker, here in the BVI, God has blessed us that even through all of this, which I agree that we need more, God has blessed us that with what we have in our hand, what we have, we walk forward, and we are competing with the world. The BVI is small, but as I say in the Jamaican dialect, we talawa. And we are competing with the world. And all public officers, Mr. Speaker, for the most part have done extremely well. But show me any system that is perfect or anybody that is perfect. None. So I said that, Mr. Speaker, because this work precipitated from some actions that had to be taken. And it came out of the NAMLAC group. And also everyone in that group having their assignment and staying on target with it. And I credit all of them, from the AG's office, the DPP office, to the financial services group, and everyone has played a role and played a role well. And we are also getting the legislation passed in good timing, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we remain not on the cutting edge, I have to take that back, but on the bleeding edge with Financial Investigation Agency. So, Mr. Speaker, a lot of work is being done, has been done, and continues to be done by the people of this territory, this country, to keep us moving, keep us out there being on the top. But, Mr. Speaker, as I intend to only show the areas where we may be weak or deemed to be weak. And, Mr. Speaker, it's up to us to show the world that we cannot be categorized in a negative manner for a few areas that we may be weak in. And when I say may, Mr. Speaker, one day, in the early times of the ferry boats, I was out on the bay, as we say, in my village, and I saw the bomber charger coming down. That was a couple of years ago, speeding, and I said, this thing moving fast. But then out of nowhere, I see the Oriole bus out from by the gut and pick it down and pass it. I said, man, this thing moving faster. And by the way, one of my favorite boats is the bomber charger, so I got angry. But I said that to say that you always look good when you are compared to yourself, or you're being compared to yourself. But compare this little nation to all those other nations, including those who feel that they were out sin, to come and judge. Compare us to them. And I can tell you, pound for pound, statistically, we'll end up in front. Compare us to them. So we have done well in this industry, but we have done well overall. And we are doing it in good timing, Mr. Speaker. And it's important for us to highlight these. Even the United Nations have recognized the BVI on how we have handled COVID-19. And the division of the United Nations that has done that has sent to me in writing this. Mr. Speaker, did you understand what I just told you? The United Nations the different parts of it, and the unit of it that deals with us here in the Caribbean wrote to say that they admire how we have handled COVID-19. I don't think this House have heard what I have said. The House a little sleepy. The United Nations have recognized how the BVI handled COVID-19. There's some who never knock. But the truth doesn't need anyone's belief. But I need to point these things out, Mr. Speaker, because one of the things we have to understand in life is that we have to be forever better than our best. Because the kind of industries that we are competing in, Mr. Speaker, are not any light industries. There are bigger nations wondering how can the BVI survive in financial services in different areas. But it isn't our intelligence alone with what we're doing here with the FIA bill. It's our belief in God. And yesterday I shared something. I usually try to inspire people on Facebook because some people say they feel down with the COI. I said I don't feel down with anything. When you do wrong is when you feel down. I don't feel down. I know that God is going to move in a mighty way, and I proclaim it already. And I believe that in Jesus' name, this territory. That's why I let out on Facebook and, well, not Facebook, and my WhatsApp groups. I tell them, do not put your fire, do not put out your fire because someone else doesn't understand your flame. The surest way to make persons feel like they're not doing anything is to try to pick on areas that you feel that we can dig it and dig it and dig it. And if they're not strong mentally as a country and as a people, you feel that you're not successful. And you feel you're not worthy. Look at the bills we have brought here with financial services. Look at the bills we have brought with contractor general legislation. It's amazing that when we bring good governance legislation, it's being deemed that we're only doing that because there's a COI. But all the other bills we pass, nobody said anything about it. This is amazing to me. That's why I don't let anyone brand me, or they're not going to brand this country, Mr. Speaker, in the way they want. Lawyers always say, and I don't mean anything bad by the AG, lawyers always say this, that they bring truth to power. Lawyers always say that. And I said, I don't want to make anything to the AG, because I know she says it sometimes, but that's not the point I'm getting at. But because we are a praying nation, the Lord is going to bring the power to the truth. And the power of this territory is in our prayers. Because truth has no weight if we don't have power. And the truth of the matter is, we have some of the brightest minds in the world walking here in the BVI. You could drop them in China, they're going to survive and thrive, not just survive. Whether it be in financial services, whether it be in accounts, whether it be in engineering, whether it be in FIA, whether it be in any section of financial services, overall, we're going to do well. It is a testament to the solid educational foundation that we have. But I don't realize, Mr. Speaker, that whenever you try to move towards self-determination, the aim is to make us feel that we're not worthy, we're not ready, and some of our people believe this. Well, I have one philosophy in life. If we can't bring our people towards independence, we will bring independence towards our people. And what I mean by that, we're going to educate you. We're going to let you to know that you're done free. It's up to you to decide to come out of the imaginary cell that you think that you're in. The minute you understand your purpose that God placed you here on earth to fulfill, you'll understand that you're done free. And we have to build our society with laws that will help strengthen us in all areas. FIA, the banking sector, and we'll be pushing for some more legislation with the banking sector because a lot of our people losing homes in a pandemic that is the worst in 100 years because they have not been hired and we cannot leave certain institutions tell us that they cannot do better. We have to bring legislation to start to let them to know during pandemics and catastrophic events that you have to adjust your policies. And I want to thank those banks that are doing so, but not all of them are. And I have to bring this in here, Mr. Speaker, because I noticed that there's a push by some to beef up security. That is good. Beef up certain laws dealing with crime. That is good. But whenever the time comes to beef up the laws to help the people, they're absent. And they look at it as wasting time. But Mr. Speaker, I think wasting time. Because I want to say this here, Mr. Speaker, and I mean it. The Virgin Islands built on what our forefathers did. And we are a young country growing and coming and growing and coming. And since there are some who don't want us to speak in certain areas, we speak here, growing in certain areas and coming. We're growing and coming. And we only had the Legislative Council about 70-something years ago. And Mr. Speaker, with growing, you're going to have some little errors. But when you look and see what we have built from where they left us as a bird sanctuary, and now we have it to the point where we were bright enough to build it, but too stupid to carry it forward to some. Or, may I add, in some minds, too corrupt to carry it forward. Because that's how they deem us. But we cannot allow those brands to come on us. But don't blame them. I saw a cartoon strip on the Minister of Health Facebook page with the 3 little pigs in the building and the wolf were there huffing and puffing, and the one pig, because you know nowadays we're in technology, so the cartoons change. He had his phone, and he was on the net looking at Facebook, looking at all what I was saying while they were in the house. And Twitter, he was looking at Twitter because he wanted to know if everybody didn't see this wolf trying to build on the house to come after them. And he was shocked when he saw the remarks. He had to tell the 2 little pigs, look, there are more people out there rooting for the wolf than we are. Because he thought based on how things were that the other pigs would be saying, my son, I'm with you. I don't want the fox reach you. But he said he had more of them out there batting for the fox on Twitter than for them, the pig. And I learned something that story just helps it. That once you're fighting on a principle, and bringing forward your people in financial services and financial investigation agency or whatever it is, wherever you lead, and once you fight on a principle, don't look for a crowd to be behind you. Do these legislations knowing that they're going to help the country. Don't look for a crowd to be behind you. Because it's the right thing to do to strengthen your democracy, to strengthen further strengthen your democracy and further strengthen your good governance. Don't look for a crowd. Because, Mr. Speaker, a lot of people become comfortable where they are, and when the time comes to move financial services to the next paradigm, they're always with a what if. Time to move the economy to the next paradigm is a what if. So it comes with resistance. But I want to tell you, or can I tell you, or may I tell the people of the Virgin Islands, whether they like it or not, that had Moses not moved when he was told that history would record a different ending for the children of Israel, the Israelites. Because Moses had to deal with a Pharaoh then that was even heavier than the Pharaoh that anybody could imagine now. But the moral of the story is he moved on a principle and he was on a mission that was approved by God for the people. And although even when they came out, some doubted, the end of the story is, despite the delays, which were not good, they reached to the promised land. But to get that done, Mr. Speaker, somebody had to move. And may I tell the whole House, the impossible will remain impossible until you make it possible. The impossible will remain impossible until you make it possible. An old man told me that before, and I think I saw that in some books, so I won't take the full credit for it. They didn't say it quite like that, but I paraphrased it. And Mr. Speaker, it's important to say these things because here we have all that it takes to move our financial services forward to our next level. Today I released a speech even on the tax with the G7 before I came to the House. We have to continue to push ahead, to keep what we have and to do it even in a larger scale. And I respect everyone, Mr. Speaker. That's the thing, I respect everyone. But I'm coming to realize that everyone doesn't respect the BVI or respect the leaders. And it has nothing to do with what some of our people think. Anybody who's representing the people should feel no less a representative because they didn't major to be a medical doctor. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want to major to be a PhD in human resources, I have saw children I thought were brilliant in some of what I saw them major in. I saw they would have majored in something else, and they tell me that's not their passion. Good leadership doesn't come from your academics alone. It comes from your passion to lead the people, to get God's will done for them. And that's why we're here today. This house has continued so much over the last weeks. I think is next to the labor, when we are doing the new labor code, that went for weeks. I think this one compete with it, but not quite because the other one went for, I think, for nearly 10 or so weeks. The record will bear me out, continuation of the same sitting. But this sitting has been going on for a while because of the different legislations that we have had in it, so that we can see if we can improve our territory, strengthen it further into good governance and into other areas. But I give that backdrop to show the people of the Virgin Islands how much work is going on behind the scenes. So when you come here and you see the AG get up and she speaks on that FIA bill or whatever other bill dealing with financial services or criminal or crime, or myself speak on them, or the junior minister speak on them, whether it be Castro or whether it be Flax-Chaz or Smith and the ministers, Reimer and Talio and the Deputy Premier, and you have also Whitley, Vincent Whitley, VW9, and Calvin Malone, and also Mrs. Honorable Maduro Keynes, and even the opposition, they play their role. It's not because we're just talking, but because this side here is working. Mr. Speaker, we have called a series of House of Assembly meetings so that we can get the work of the people done. We have answered questions, we have brought legislation to make the BVI better. And we did that now coming down more so lately by getting more done in the House other than health matters, because we have done all that we can to help us with the health matters up to the point where we have the vaccines, and we hope for it to help us through. But it's important for persons to understand these things, Mr. Speaker, because there are those who are trying to make people feel that nothing is happening. The seeds that we are planting with these legislation to help our economy, when they start to grow, some of them in months' time, when they start to grow, some of them in a year time, when they start to grow, some of them in 2 years or 3 years' time, our economy will be stronger than it is and might be stronger than it ever was. That is why some of them see that from now. They see that from now. And they would want to get their hands on it rather than us. But that's not God's plan for this place. I proclaim that we'll continue to run our country because that's what Jesus wants, and I proclaim that in Jesus' name. I proclaim it lately because those who are against you are more than you yourself. So you only could turn and say, God, you got to fight these battles, because what we want for the people of the Virgin Islands coming from the pureness of our heart. Mr. Speaker, you know how it is to get a bill here to this house? People on the radio talking about how much bills we have here. You have to be like a chicken hawk behind the scenes to get a bill to this house. And when you finally get the bill to the house, and you have to get these sittings and going, people, some of them, some persons are taking this as no work at all, and it doesn't matter. And we're just trying to rush bills for rushing sake. If we don't pass these same FIA bills and things, and the time frame come for the evaluation and we don't have them in place, let me see what's going to happen. The same file what they're telling us along with the bills is who going to say, look what he and his government, I got to speak how they're going to speak. Look what he and the government do to the country. They knew this evaluation was coming. They didn't get up to pass the thing in time, and look where we are. But we're doing it in time. And we have done it in time with the shipping registry. I go to other one. We were told with the shipping registry by some other powers that we cannot make it to be considered to be evaluated in category 1. AG would know about this. And I tell them we're going to make it. And we push our way forward to the point where we have passed the mock audit. And you have shown us the areas where we have to improve. I think overall it was nearly about 60-something areas we had to work on. And now we left with 19 areas to improve upon before now in September. But they said it's a remarkable job. And I have to thank the Attorney General and the Virgin Islands Shipping Registry team and all of that. All those teams, we had to expand. We had to do many things because a lot of revenue going to come through for shipping registry also. And today we have a graduation. Thanks for reminding me. Where more of our children are going to be graduating, coming out. And we have the scholarship program that the Minister of Education and his government has started back. Don't tell me we haven't done anything. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I have about 7 godchildren graduating today. And I don't want to keep the AG any further. So, Mr. Speaker, I get up to say those few words in support of the FIA bill. But I had to, the FIA bill is a big piece of content, a big text that we have. Minister of Health says a little thicker. It's a big text that we have. But I realized that you have to bring context to these texts and the pretext so that person could know what was happening before we came in here, and to remind our people that we, with God's grace, get us here. We didn't do it on our own. We get some help. Even from others, we got help. But let's not underestimate what we have done. Because we have a society now that if you ask a person to name 10 things that have you angry, they could write them off, but somebody, they'll write it off in a minute. And if you ask them to name 10 things you love but the same person, they take forever. Because some of our people gravitating towards only hatred, only bad-mindedness, melee, gossip. Everybody love a little melee and gossip now and again. But you have to put it in context and say, Lord, man, it sounds sweet, but that one don't make sense. But you cannot determine people's life, our country life, on melee and gossip. But that ain't going to change. That's going to stay till the kingdom come. So we the one who have to change and adjust ourselves and adjust our mindset and be careful who's in the boardroom of our minds. So this bill has my full approval, and I want to commend all again. Thank you.
I thank the Honorable Premier and Member for the 1st District for his contributions to the debate. Is there any other person wishing to speak? Hearing none, I call on the mover of the motion, the Madam Attorney General, to wrap up the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am reminded by my colleagues that this is an important day for many parents and students in the Virgin Islands. So I won't take much longer, save to, of course, to thank not only the team at the Attorney General's office, but to acknowledge the sterling support that has come from the Financial Services Commission and the Financial Investigation Agency in bringing this bill to fruition. I look forward to the committee stage, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Financial Investigative Agency Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a second time.
This act may be cited as the Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the bill now stands committed to a committee to examine it clause by clause. This House is now in committee. Honorable members have deliberated on the Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021. I call upon the mover of the motion, the Honorable Attorney General, to report.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the bill entitled Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021 has passed through committee without amendments. Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the bill entitled Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021 be read a third time and passed.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the bill entitled Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021 be now read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a third time.
This act may be cited as the Financial Investigation Agency Amendment Act 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed. I call upon the clerk.
Item number 8.2, private members' business. Item number 9, other business. Item number 10, adjournment.
Is anyone moving to adjourn the House?
The host, Sunny Light.
Is there a second? A motion on the floor to adjourn the House, sine die. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House, the 9th sitting, is now adjourned, sine die.